Hello, my name is Olurotimi. As you recall, May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and we had a lot going on in April. There was a lot of familicide going on, domestic, intimate partner, domestic violence. A lot of it attributed to mental health crisis, right? So something interesting caught my eye on July the 18th, 2026, just 2 days ago. The city manager of Sausalito in California. Sausalito is a city in California, and by the way, a city manager is the equivalent is like a mayor. Only that while a mayor, they're the chief executive of a city, and they are elected, right? They're elected. It's a political post. However, a city manager is appointed, right? They're appointed for their skills, their competence. So they're the chief executive officer of the city. So the city manager of Sausalito was arrested on a yacht on July the 18th, 2026. That was just 2 days ago, and she claimed the yacht was her own. And so the sheriffs arrested her, booked her in a in a jail, and they charged her with felony burglary. Right. So when the law enforcement approached her, she said the vessel, the yacht was hers, and she was having a bad morning, and they should get off her yacht. But the owner of the yacht said, she wasn't authorized to be there. It wasn't hers. And apparently, it turns out from the way it looks, she was going through a psychotic episode, a mental health crisis. What is interesting is that she uh, was the city manager at the time. I don't know if she's still the city manager. This happened just 2 days ago. The city manager, she was earning $275,000. Her resume is very impressive. I went to look at her resume. Prior to her becoming city manager, she had actually been the executive director of the Port of San Francisco for a long time, almost a decade. She had been chief financial officer of the city of that San Francisco. So she'd done a variety of things. Very impressive resume, and obviously she's city manager. She was hired for her skills, but just this just reminds us of what can go on in a mental health crisis. And the reason why I'm saying mental health is because her spokesperson says that it's she's experiencing a mental health crisis. So let me quickly read from what her spokesperson said. So her spokesperson, the city manager's name is Elaine Forbes, and so she says, the spokesperson says, Elaine has devoted much of her life to public service and is widely respected by the many people who have worked with her over the years. Elaine is experiencing a mental health crisis. As the facts become clearer and Elaine obtains legal and healthcare counsel in the coming hours and days, we hope people will respond with compassion, patience, and respect for her and her family during an extraordinarily difficult time. So that's what the spokesperson for Elaine Forbes, the city manager for Sausalito in California, said. So, like I said, mental health is something you should extend compassion for, and it is sad that from a mental health episode, one goes from a condition that's due to no fault of yours, and all of a sudden you're a criminal. You're labeled a criminal, and of course this is a high-profile person, a city manager. Again, like I said, a city manager is the equivalent of um, a mayor, right? Mayor of a city, and she's been executive director, that's head of the Port of San Francisco, right? And all of a sudden she's booked in jail and charged with felony burglary, right? And it turns out she was having some sort of psychotic episode, right? So she didn't know where she was. Um, But do other people get the same compassion that she's probably going to get? No. Especially when it comes to minorities. Elaine Forbes, by the way, is a white woman. I mean, she appears to be a white woman, so photos are available online. And in this paper that I read it from, this is the New York Post. Studies, surveys indicate that about almost half of Gen Z, right, the Gen Z generation, have sought counseling for mental health, right, some form of counseling for mental health and mental treatment. So, that's people who have actively sought help. There are many who, because of the stigma of mental health, will not go and seek help. But the thing is, people experiencing mental health crisis, mental illness, it's disconcerting that they are treated as criminals. They're criminalized. And look, she was trespassing. She was taking over somewhere property that was not hers. So she's been charged with felony burglary, right? So if people break the law, it doesn't matter what their title is, what their status in society is. They should be charged with crimes. But let us just be cognizant that this sort of mental health crisis exists in the United States. And so, and the resources of the state or the government should be used judiciously, right, to address these crises. And I'm talking about this considering that I was swatted. I've done a video explaining what a swatting is. That's when someone makes a false crisis report. It could be a false police report. Since I'm talking about mental health, I'm going to speak with respect to that aspect. So someone makes a false crisis report that someone's experiencing a mental health crisis, right? When they're not, right? So it's a hoax call. It's been done maliciously. It's just to get law enforcement, because unfortunately in most jurisdictions in America, it's law enforcement, it's the police that respond to a mental health crisis, not medics, right? Not physicians, not experts. Well, because physicians and medical professionals don't want to get harmed, right? So if somebody is going through a mental health crisis and they think they're armed and dangerous, they would rather have the police diffuse the situation first, right? To make sure that that's to make sure the medical professionals don't get hurt. But there are many ways to de-escalate the situation, right? And so my point is that just because these conditions occur, and which should elicit compassion, right? Compassion and sensitivity. The state needs to punish and prosecute more vigorously instances of swatting. Like, I was a victim of a swatting. I've been talking about it by a Howard University professor who acted maliciously, right? He made a false mental health crisis emergency call because I asked him not to come to my property, right? This was my home. I was leasing an apartment. It was in my name. I lived alone. And he was harassing me. He was stalking me. He assaulted me. And then he files a false emergency petition that brought a SWAT team to assault me. They almost killed me. You see these scars on my head. They're from the projectile shot from the SWAT team of Montgomery County Police Officer Jeffrey Ray. I was shot there, and I was subsequently stitched. Right, I was almost killed. I was tasered multiple times. I have lasting injuries, right, permanent injuries right now. So people like Jide Warire and the neighbor he came with, Germa Shumi, they assaulted me. They filed fabricated crisis report. This has been clarified. It's been determined, right? I don't have a mental illness. All the psychiatrists, I had no idea what was going on. I just told this man, don't come to my home, right? That's my right. Then he goes to file this fabrication saying, well, I called my home a military base, and I said his wife is dead, that I said my home is a military base, and I threatened to shoot him. Lawyers he hired claimed that he said I had bombs, all sorts of stuff, right? So you should have seen the force that came to assault me in my home on May 16, 2023. I was at my gym on May 15, 2023. My friends, nobody, no one has ever heard me call my home a military base. It's been almost 4 years now. Prior to that, this had never heard, that what Jide Wariri lied about had never happened. Since then, nothing like that has ever happened. I lost 450 days. I was detained for 450 days based on the lies of Howard University professor Jide Wariri. So you could see, and it wasn't just him. He abused his influence because Judge BBM Berry, right? She collaborated with him, Judge James Bonifant. So these are people who they abused their authority, their office, to aid Jide Wariri commit the malicious swatting that he engaged in. And swatting is a federal and a state crime, right? It's prosecuted under federal law under 18 USC section 1038 and 18 USC section 1030, because sometimes they use because if they use the telephone, right? He used the telephone. He used to make the false call to the police in the first place, right? And it's interesting that there are people who go through psychotic episodes, right? Since I was swatted, I've seen somebody in a state of psychosis, right? And they don't know where they are, right? So one should treat such people with compassion, right? Mental illness is real. It's exacerbated in the United States because America is a pressure cooker, right? And unfortunately, it's stigmatized in the United States rather than, and the healthcare system is terrible, right? So, and people who experience mental health crisis, they're stigmatized, they're criminalized, as we can see from the city manager Elaine Forbes. Yes, her mental health crisis caused her to commit a crime, right? She'd taken possession. She was somewhere she wasn't supposed to be in. And I guess, she's going through the legal process. So she's currently been charged with felony burglary. She was arrested. It's very unfortunate. A city manager worked very hard, very impressive resume, but it can happen to anyone, right? And she's so, but again, it's still, they're deserving of compassion. I have several friends who've admitted to me that they struggle with mental illness, right? I've dated someone, who admitted to me they struggled with mental illness. Many people, I guess, because they've struggled with it for a long time and they have the resources, they can handle it. They know they have coping mechanisms. They know how to handle it. I have friends who've admitted. I had classmates who told me about it and about their mental illness, their struggle with mental illness. In fact, on my Facebook page, my friends, they were my classmates. I remember when I was in law school, and at the time I didn't understand some that were my friends that I talked to, and they just start to share on Facebook their struggle with mental illness. And I would think, oh, this is TMI, why are they sharing so much? That's a private matter. Why are they letting people know what their private business is? That's embarrassing. And then I realized what they were trying to do was by talking about it, that, well, if someone who's a lawyer like them in law school, they're successful, if they can actually have these battles with mental illness, then maybe their friends who have compassion for them, would probably have compassion for others as well. And she was probably just trying to make people be able to table mental health, in the open, in public, and so to elicit more compassion for people who struggle with mental illness and maybe bring about policy that can help address it, right? And that we shouldn't just see people who struggle with mental illness as the criminally insane, right? as criminals and to be ostracized, right? So I guess I realize now that this was what they were trying to do, and so in any event, I hope she's able to sort this out, and as her spokesperson says, that that this public should treat her with the compassion that she deserves, she and her family. But again, it's an unfortunate situation. Like I said, I've seen someone, since my experience, because if you haven't encountered something like that, you probably won't give it a thought. But I saw someone, who was going through a psychotic episode, and they didn't know where they were. They couldn't even see. They couldn't relate with people. It was a completely, strange experience to observe, right? And I remember somebody was telling me that, what's funny is that after they're medicated and their med sets in, that if they're told about the experience, they'll never believe. They won't remember a thing. They won't remember a thing. In any event, my name is Oluroti Nyosha. I will keep you posted. Thank you.